I won $2.5 million in the lottery, and my mother's first reaction wasn't to congratulate me. It was to ask if I had told my sister yet. I used to think that if a miracle ever happened in my life, I'd leap into the air, call everyone I knew, and shout it from the rooftops. But the truth is, when all 6 numbers appeared, perfectly matching the crumpled ticket I had bought on a whim at the gas station down the street, I just sat there, silent, clutching the remote, my heart pounding so hard I felt like I might throw up what was left of my dinner. My small apartment was silent, just as it always was. There was no one to tell. No cheers. No hugs. No champagne. Just me, a reheated bowl of last night's pasta, and the ticking of the wall clock sounding louder than usual, as if reminding me that everything had changed, or maybe nothing had. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 36 years old and work as a marketing coordinator at a local hospital in Burlington, Vermont. My life, if you asked, could be summed up in a few tidy sentences. I show up on time. I pay my loans. I avoid trouble, avoid noise. And at family gatherings, I'm only ever asked one thing. Still single, Claire? I'm the eldest daughter. The strong one, the independent one, the one who doesn't ask for help. Meanwhile, Melanie, my younger sister, who dropped out of college 3 times in the name of finding herself, is still regarded as the family gem. My mother has a phrase she's repeated often, half joking, but not really. Melanie is the heart. Claire is the backbone. I used to believe that. That backbone trembled the night I realized I'd won. I held the ticket in shaking hands, staring at the screen. 6 matching numbers. $2.5 million. I snapped a photo, tucked the ticket inside my copy of Jane Eyre, and sat for another 45 minutes, my hand wrapped around a cup of cold tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. I didn't call my mother. I didn't message Melanie. I called Joanne, the only person who'd ever see me cry the day I got laid off from my temp job in a restructuring. She arrived within 20 minutes, said little, just sat beside me and said, "If anyone deserves a turning point, it's you. But be careful. Money is the biggest magnifying glass there is. It exaggerates both kindness and greed." I nodded, but even then, I couldn't have imagined how cruel that magnification could become. There's a truth I haven't spoken out loud since I was a child. I've never truly felt love for who I am. I was acknowledged when I was useful, when I stayed quiet, when I was the backdrop that made Melanie shine brighter. I thought if I were successful enough, quiet enough, grateful enough, maybe then they would see me. But what I've learned after 36 years is this. Some people will never see you, unless you turn into a wallet. That night, while Joanne slept on my sofa and I lay awake in my room, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. Don't share your joy with people who found your pain inconvenient. And I knew then, the real gift this money gave me wasn't financial. It was a chance to rewrite the rules of my own existence. I woke up at 6:17 the next morning. Not because of my alarm, but because of a cold draft slipping through the window crack. My 3rd-floor apartment wasn't remarkable. White walls, wooden floors, gray curtains, but that morning, it felt like a place I no longer recognized. The silence was so heavy it felt unnatural, as if every object was waiting for me to speak first. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen counter, staring at the folded lottery ticket tucked into page 137 of Jane Eyre, right where the heroine realizes she has fallen for someone who cannot love her back. A part of me wanted to cry at the bitter coincidence, but I didn't. I started a list, not a shopping list, not a to-do list, a different kind of list. If I disappeared today, what would I leave behind, and to whom? And if I chose to live, truly live, what would finally belong to me? I wrote, pay off student loans, because in America, debt is a family heirloom. Buy a small house with a garden and triple locks. Start a scholarship fund for girls whose voices are called too sharp. And most importantly, stay silent until I'm sure who's listening out of love and who's just planning to take. Joanne arrived at 8:30, bringing coffee and a wordless hug. She's the kind of person who understands that silence has its own dialect, and today its name was fear. I know, she said, after I showed her the ticket again. But you need to know this too. The people we call family are often the ones who write the cruelest chapters in our family tales. I nodded. I had once read revenge stories and cheating stories like they were wild storms that happened to other people. Now, they felt as familiar as the scent of my mother's laundry detergent. The apartment remained quiet, but within that stillness, I could hear the sound of shifting, trust slipping from its pedestal, memories falling off their high shelves, and the title, Good Daughter, cracking in a way that couldn't be glued back together. Joanne offered to help me find a financial advisor, and I agreed. She said, "Don't let anyone make you choose between kindness and the right to be sovereign." I wanted to hold on to that sentence like a shield, because I knew what came next wouldn't be celebration. It would be another wind, colder, sharper, dressed as good intentions. Before Joanne left, I sealed something in my mind. I am not a supporting character in someone else's story, and if anyone thinks they can rewrite my life in the ink of obligation, they should know I hold a pen now, and what I write with is the truth. Some dinners aren't made with love, but with expectation. And some chairs aren't meant for sitting. They exist to remind you of your place in a family structured like a stage play, where people don't love you, they simply perform beside you. That Sunday afternoon, I drove to my parents' house with a mind suspended in limbo. Not happy, not sad, just like a background actor entering a scene that had already been written with no lines of her own. I arrived earlier than usual because that's how my mother liked it. She said helping in the kitchen was a sign of a thoughtful woman. The smell of roast beef, mashed potatoes, and cheap red wine hung in the air. The kitchen clattered with pots, pans, and cutlery, but it also held a particular kind of silence, the kind stretched thin like a violin string right before it snaps. I thought maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Maybe when I shared my news, they'd look at me in a way I'd never seen before, with recognition without suspicion. But I forgot. To some people, you are always too little, unless you give them everything. "You look different," my mom said while setting the table. "Did you get a promotion?" I gave a faint smile. "Not exactly, but it's a big change." Once everyone was seated, I took a deep breath. "Last week, I won the lottery. $2.5 million. The sentence hit the dinner table like shattered glass. Everyone stopped chewing. My father set down his spoon. My mother raised an eyebrow. Melanie, my younger sister, leaned in as if the news belonged to her before it ever belonged to me. "You're joking, right?" she asked, smirking. "I'm not. The ticket was real." My mother was the first to react, not with congratulations, but with a sentence that chilled me. "Melanie, you should tell your sister about your spa business idea." I sat there, surrounded by blood ties, feeling like a ghost in one of those betrayal stories I used to read. No one asked how I felt. No one asked what I planned to do. The moment turned, quickly and cleanly, into an opportunity for others to revive their unfinished dreams, as if my fortune existed to redeem their delays. Melanie launched into a pitch about a wellness center combining beauty treatments, meditation, and sound healing. She'd said something similar when she quit communications, then nutrition, then interior design. My dad nodded approvingly. "Perfect timing. Claire, you could invest in your sister's future. Family takes care of its own." I nearly choked on my water. How were they crafting such a polished, hidden revenge narrative with such straight faces? I haven't received the money yet. There are procedures. I need time to think, I replied slowly. No need to think. Family should share, my mother said coldly. Don't be selfish, Claire. This is your time to give back. I looked at my mother, the woman who had taught me how to be silent at the right moments, and for the first time, I saw that her version of silence only ever existed to let others speak louder. Melanie scoffed. If I won, I'd split it with you immediately. No hesitation. I said nothing. I just remember the time she inherited a small sum from Grandma and went to the Maldives without so much as buying me lunch. That night wasn't about the money. It was a modern twist on infidelity stories, where betrayal doesn't come from lovers, it comes from the assumption that blood alone guarantees loyalty. I stayed another 20 minutes, chewing a dinner roll that had no taste. And when I finally stood up, I understood clearly. I didn't fall from the chair, but the world I was sitting in had just lost a corner. I used to believe that gratitude was a beautiful virtue. But after that Sunday dinner, I began to understand, when gratitude is demanded, it stops being kindness and turns into a spiritual debt, charged with the interest of silence and self-erasure. The next day, my mother called, not to ask if I had slept well, but to tell me I should reconsider Melanie's situation. Her voice was soft as syrup, but every word carried the scent of aged expectations. Claire, she said, I'm not asking for myself. I just think you've always been a grateful daughter, and grateful daughters don't keep score. I wanted to ask, grateful to whom? For what? For being born to carry the weight of a sibling who always played the lead role while I built the stage beneath her? I sat there, phone to my ear, heart sinking into the sediment of old years. Gratitude in our family wasn't rooted in love. It was rooted in a quiet kind of cheating, emotional cheating, where your role as the good child was assigned at birth and never up for revision. I remember the time I realized my father had a relationship with another woman, someone who called the house late at night and claimed to be a colleague at the museum. I was 14, but even then I knew this wasn't some wholesome family plot. It was a true infidelity story, and I had been cast as a silent audience, not allowed to question, let alone speak. My mother knew. I'm sure of it, but she chose to look away. And from that point on, our home adopted an unspoken rule. If it looks peaceful, it can't be wrong. I thought of that as she continued. Melanie is a feeler. She needs you. And if you can help, you should. I wanted to tell her I had needed someone too. When I worked 2 jobs to pay off student loans. When my boyfriend cheated and I came home shaking. When I lost a pregnancy and lay alone in an ER bed. No one asked if I was okay. They just said, Claire's strong. As if strength was a valid excuse to neglect someone. That's when I realized, not all cheating stories are about romance. Some are written in bloodlines, where people betray your trust and quietly conspire to convince you that your life belongs to them. I ended the call with a simple, I'll think about it. But the truth was, I already had. That night, I opened a new Excel file. For the first time, I listed what I had done for others and what they had truly done for me. Not to tally or to accuse, but to finally see the truth. Not through the gloss of cheating wife stories dressed up as family harmony, but through the sharp light of adulthood. And I realized a grateful child also has the right to be grateful for herself first. I started planning on a drizzly afternoon, when every outside noise seemed drained from the air. My apartment was so still that the soft tap of each keystroke sounded like a final affirmation. I would not yield one more time. In my family, plans are usually drawn in crowded rooms, with loud voices, pressing glances, and the banner of because we're family. But this time, I wrote my plan in silence, a language manipulators never quite master. I wasn't writing revenge. I was rewriting boundaries. I listed every detail: separate accounts, an independent lawyer, a financial advisor with no connection to any relatives. I learned vocabulary I thought only belonged in legal dramas or family drama stories airing at 8 p.m. Joanne helped me connect with a personal legacy consultant. "It's not because you don't trust," she said. "It's because people only need a sliver of information to turn the world you're building into a battlefield." I thought about my mother, about the blade in her eyes during our last conversation. I thought about Melanie, who wasn't cruel, just used to forgiveness arriving before she even asked. And I thought about myself, the one who always played the responsible sister, even when I was little more than a welcome mat for other people's needs. If my life were a play, this would be the scene where I stepped out of the old spotlight and lit my own damn stage. I reread the infidelity story entries I had saved on my old blog. Not the steamy love triangles, but the true infidelity story kind that unfolded at dinner tables, where betrayal wasn't a stolen kiss, but a handshake agreeing who would be loved and who would be left behind. I realized I had lived in a system where loyalty was rewarded with erasure, a family where silence was mistaken for contentment, and worst of all, a place that taught me familial love was sacred, as long as I was the one sacrificing. No more. I told no one, but I began transferring money, changing passwords, deleting shared accounts for good. I didn't slam doors, didn't scream slogans of self-righteousness. I simply unhooked each thread that had quietly tied me down with precision and without apology. That night, I sat alone, sipping red wine, and wrote the first line of my personal manifesto. Silence is not surrender. Silence is the strategy of those who refuse to bleed one more drop for battles that aren't worth it. If one day someone calls what I did family revenge stories, I won't argue. But I'll know this wasn't revenge. This was salvation. The photo appeared on page 3 of the morning paper, right beneath the headline, "Local Woman Wins Jackpot." A clear image, well lit, with me in a cream blouse, hair tied low. Smiling, but not a real smile. The kind of smile women are taught early. Polite, pleasant, careful not to disturb anyone's peace. I hadn't submitted the photo myself. The reporter had asked to use the one from the hospital's HR file, and in a moment of softness, I agreed. I thought it would be fine. I was wrong. 2 hours later, my mother called, not to congratulate me. She said, "Everyone at church knows now. Claire, what were you thinking, letting the whole neighborhood find out?" That's when I understood something. Some families don't hate that you're wealthy. They hate that you got there without them. My phone started ringing nonstop. Relatives I hadn't heard from in 8 holiday seasons suddenly wanted to drop by. No one asked how I felt. They asked, "What are your plans for Melanie? How much are you giving your parents? Remember that car accident you had in 2003? As if every nice thing they'd ever done was a down payment, and now it was time to collect. I didn't feel angry. I felt clarity, clear like sunlight cutting through sheer curtains. Family betrayal rarely arrives with swords. It comes wrapped in kindness. Family betrayal isn't a stab. It's a gentle touch that robs you of the one thing you fought to earn, authority over your own life. I remembered something Joanne once whispered as we sat on the balcony. Burning revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's just a woman who finally stops answering the phone. I didn't pick up another call that day. I sat down and revised my plan, this time with a new line item, manage my public image. No more interviews. No more exposure. No more letting others use my name in the family tales they fabricate to prove I'm a good daughter. I emailed the paper, asked them to remove the photo and stop contacting me. In my mind, there was no fear, only fire, not the loud kind, the kind that burns slow, fueled by strategy. I wasn't out for revenge. I was claiming what they couldn't bear to see, that I could live just fine without them. This wasn't human revenge. This was survival. And in this world, a woman who knows how to protect herself is the kind of woman others fear because she stopped waiting to be rescued. If you've ever lived in a space where silence was called gratitude, where kindness was used as currency against you, this channel is for you. The door was unlocked. I thought I'd be shocked, but I wasn't. I stood there for a moment, hand resting on the polished wooden handle, watching it ease open as if the house itself knew it was about to be inspected by the daughter it once saw grow up in silence. I hadn't planned to go in. Truly. But there are moments when curiosity isn't born of suspicion, but of sorrow left unanswered. And that afternoon, I stepped into my mother's house at 12:08, without knocking, without warning. A noon break-in, not to uncover something hidden, but to finally look directly at what had always been kept just out of reach. The living room was unchanged. The red velvet couch, the plastic flower vase on the old wooden shelf, the crooked wedding photo of my parents still clinging to the wall. But amidst it all was something new, a thick folder on the coffee table titled Melanie Wellness Center, Family Funding Proposal. I wasn't surprised. I felt familiar. Familiar, like reading a chapter from one of those old family tales, where your role is always pre-written, supporting cast, savior, the good daughter who asks no questions. And for the first time, I no longer belonged in that script. I opened the file. Inside were budget sheets, spa equipment lists, 3D renderings of a dream interior. At the end, a handwritten note. Claire will fund the initial phase. It's good for the family image. I almost laughed, but my mouth was dry. Good for the family image. That phrase deserved to be carved into stone and nailed to the front door. A cold welcome. Enter and surrender your identity. I thought of those cheating stories in the news. Wives discovering infidelity through hotel receipts. But this was the family version. You find out your blood ties have betrayed you through financial spreadsheets written as casually as if you'd already consented in a past life. I placed the file back down. Took nothing. Caused no scene. I simply stood still, letting memories pile up in layers. Like the kind in revenge stories where the retaliation doesn't come with a knife, but with the quiet reclaiming of your own narrative. On a side table sat a small photo frame. Me and Melanie at 8 years old, wearing princess dresses, grinning wide. Back then, there was no envy, no exploitation. Just two little girls who believed love was forever. I walked out as quietly as I came. But this time, I carried something none of them had planned for, the truth. Not the explosive kind, but the kind that simmers, soaks in slowly, just enough to loosen every role held too tightly in this family play, like a stage suddenly gone dark. I used to believe that some battles ended after an honest conversation. That if you were brave enough, if your words were timely and true, things could be resolved with a handshake. But in my family, truth is never a full stop. It's merely the opening act for a quieter war, longer and more elegantly disguised. After the midday intrusion, I said nothing to my mother or Melanie. I expected a phone call, some confrontation. But instead, there was silence, the kind that hovers like sky before a storm, windless, rainless, still enough to ache. Then came the Friday morning text from my mother. Come home for lunch on Sunday. Your father wants to talk. No exclamation mark, no heart emoji, no warmth. So I went. The house looked the same, but the air felt different. My mother bustled in the kitchen. Melanie offered polite smiles, and my father sat at the head of the table like an aging judge, fingers clasped, eyes fixed. Claire, he began, a family is a unit. When someone strays, we bring them back. You understand? I smiled faintly. I didn't stray. I just stopped following the old map. My mother sighed. You always think we're against you. We're just trying to support each other. You have the means, Claire. You should share. Melanie chimed in like a well-rehearsed actor. It's not much, really. I have a solid plan. I just need a chance. That's when I saw it clearly. This wasn't about opportunity. It was about control. I took a sip of water, the bitterness clinging to my throat like a reminder. Speak carefully, sparingly. I won't be funding anything, I said. Not because I hate Melanie, but because, just once, I need to make a choice without it being labeled betrayal. My father's tone sharpened. That's selfish of you. I looked at him and saw the faces behind all the betrayal stories I'd read. Children turned into ATMs, women branded difficult for simply choosing independence. No, I replied. I just refused to live off guilt dressed as gratitude. No one spoke. The ticking clock filled the silence, counting down to something inevitable. And that's when I understood. This wasn't an argument. It was a quiet retreat, a strategy, a hidden revenge that didn't need fire, only a woman silent enough to stay free. I stood up, thanked them for the meal, and walked out. Not in triumph, but with something else, clarity. Behind me, the house didn't explode. No one wept. No chairs were thrown like in the infidelity stories splashed across tabloids. But I knew, from that moment on, I would no longer be written into a narrative I didn't consent to. Only, this war has no end. Because to those who can't control you, your liberation will always look like betrayal. I used to think silence was just a rest note in the family song, where I temporarily stepped back to let others shine. But over the years, I came to realize silence can also be how people write an entire symphony and credit someone else as the conductor. A week after that family dinner, I received an invitation, the grand opening of Melanie Wellness Center. Gold-trimmed card, elegant layout, my name printed under honorary sponsor. I hadn't contributed a single dollar. I wasn't angry. I just sat there, holding the card like a sheet of unnamed music, written with borrowed familiarity, second-hand reputation, and a very curated type of memory, the kind that remembers your nods but forgets your refusal to stay. I tucked the invitation away in a drawer, alongside things I once thought proved my worth. Old medals, handwritten thank you notes, framed pictures with my parents. They now felt like background music to a film I no longer starred in. That day, I went walking around the lake. A couple was arguing by a bench, the woman crying over midnight messages and a coworker named Erica. The man remained silent. No denial, no defense. Just that stillness, the kind often seen in cheating wife stories, where betrayal doesn't require proof, only the quiet withdrawal of trust. I saw myself in that story, not as the wife, but as the one inside the frame, yet cropped out of the narrative, a muted note that still shapes the rhythm of the song. A true infidelity story not born of romantic lies, but of how people use family ties to hijack your voice. I returned home, turned on my laptop, and reopened my personal blueprint. This time I renamed it Symphony for One. The one person I needed to understand, to listen to rescue was me. I unfollowed the family page, unlinked my name from all charity press. I refused to be the face for stories cheating in the name of love and legacy. Because I now knew, when you're silent, people will write your part for you. When you speak, they'll call it rebellion. But when you compose your own symphony, they can't play along. And maybe that's what freedom really means. I sat down, for the first time not caring about the time, not worrying about what anyone thought. The music I composed didn't need applause. It only needed honesty. No grand finales, no dramatic crescendo. Just me, in every note, not asking anyone's permission to live by my own rhythm. I didn't rent that house because it was cheap. I rented it because no one had ever lived there with me. A wooden porch with weathered beams, moss-covered windows, and behind it, a small forest, not dense enough to get lost in, just enough to hide. That place was like me, once part of a larger map, now choosing to retreat to a blank, unnamed corner. I didn't need anyone's permission to be at peace. On my first morning there, I made tea with my left hand, a meaningless gesture to many, but for me it was proof that I was no longer bound by old gestures, old rhythms that once defined me. The silence around me was so complete, I could hear myself breathe. Not the panicked kind you have in family drama stories, where every sentence is a standoff, but the steady kind, the breath of someone who doesn't need to win, only not be pulled back. I brought with me a small wooden box. Inside were things no one knew about. A copy of a letter from my lawyer, a list of people I trust, and a folded note that read, "When others try to rebuild you from their memories, stay silent and rebuild yourself from the present." I wasn't running away. I just refused to be part of another family revenge story written like a soap opera, where the rebel always dies or goes mad. I was choosing a different ending. No climax, no soundtrack, just trees, wind, and mornings without phone calls. One day, I received a handwritten letter from Melanie. Short, no apology, no accusations, just a line. "You know, I used to think all of this was my fault, but then I realized it was everyone's fault. And the way we were raised to believe love meant unlimited sacrifice." I didn't reply, but I cried, not because I forgave, but because for the first time, I knew I wasn't alone in feeling like I had been cast in the wrong role. Outside the house, the season began to shift. Leaves fell, and the October breeze carried a chill. I knew, when winter came, I might feel empty again. But this time, that emptiness would belong to me, not something someone else left behind. Among the old books I'd brought, there was one that told a true infidelity story. Not about cheating spouses, but about family members who betray the unspoken promise that will protect each other from the world. I closed the book and stood up. No need to journal. No need to prove anything. Because in the end, this house wasn't a place I ran to. It was the place I paused to rewrite the story. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone else write the last line. I found the letter tucked between two yellowed pages of an old book. The book wasn't mine. It came in a canvas tote Melanie had sent a few days ago, along with some old scarves, a turquoise fountain pen, and a copy of The Stranger in the Mirror, the novel we used to fight over as kids. I hadn't planned on rummaging, but when I flipped through the middle pages, the letter slipped out like a dried leaf waiting for the right moment to fall. No date, no heading, just slanted handwriting in smudged blue ink, full of spaces between the lines, like the writer couldn't decide whether to keep it or tear it up. "Claire, I don't know if I should send this. Maybe not. But I need to write. Not to explain, just to breathe. I used to think you were a mountain, solid, silent, and never needing anyone. I didn't realize your silence made me feel like I had to scream just to be heard. Maybe I took advantage of you. Maybe I thought leaning on you was a birthright. You were the only one I believed wouldn't walk away. But I forgot. Even mountains can erode when people keep taking and never give back. I'm not sorry for dreaming. I'm sorry for dreaming on someone else's back. If you're reading this, then maybe I never got around to tearing it up." I sat down, holding the letter like a thin mirror, not one that reflected my face, but one that mirrored memory, the things never said yet always present. A confession that didn't seek forgiveness. A sigh written into words. I used to think revenge was action, a rebellion, loud and sharp. But now I know there's a kind of burning revenge with no flames at all, only a person who decides not to carry the weight anymore. And that quiet refusal becomes fire. I didn't call Melanie. I simply wrote one line in my journal. Not everyone knows they're the betrayer until they hear the story in someone else's voice. In all the family tales retold over holiday dinners, Melanie was always the fragile younger sister, and I, the cold, responsible one. But anyone who ever listened between the pauses would hear it. Every family betrayal starts with a silent expectation that you'll keep enduring so others can stay the good ones. And when you stop, they call it rebellion. I folded the letter but didn't file it away with keepsakes. I left it on the windowsill, where the morning light touches first. Because forgiveness isn't always an act. Sometimes it's an empty space no longer waiting to be filled. As I left the room, the wind rustled the letter's edge. Gently, like a whisper. Not from Melanie, but from within me. A kind of human revenge not meant to destroy, only to affirm that, after everything, I am still here, still mine. I am when I believed that growing up meant extending obligations. That adulthood was about filling the vacant chair in the family, upholding the honor of being a well-raised daughter. But no one ever taught me how to decline a role when the script had already rotted from the inside. I used to be the kind of daughter who stayed quiet during family gatherings, who swallowed her questions when mother gave orders, smiled when she was overlooked, shrank like a sealed envelope no one ever intended to send. But not anymore. And surprisingly, I don't feel guilty. I feel like I can breathe, fully, without debt. Today, I stood in my kitchen and made coffee without anyone instructing how much to pour. No one asked me, "Why aren't you married yet?" No one stared at me like my choices were a game played wrong. I turned on an old song, the kind my mother used to call noisy and cultureless, and I sang along, quietly, just enough to hear my own voice. I thought about the family tales we retell every Lunar New Year. The youngest daughter who gives up college to support her brother. The mother who weeps because her children no longer send money home. Stories likely born from love, but stretched over time into shackles, where duty becomes a golden cuff disguised as affection. I was once part of those cheating stories, not in the romantic sense, but in the betrayal of silent expectations. When you're loved only as long as you play the role right, and neglected the moment you speak your mind, that's an emotional affair no one dares to name. Like in many revenge stories I'd known, I once believed vengeance was proving I could still thrive, successful, resilient, self-made. But today, while sweeping the quiet corners of his house, I finally understood. True revenge is when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. When you live a life that doesn't crave applause, only self-authority. I opened a drawer and took out an old photo, me at 8, standing beside my parents and Melanie. I smiled awkwardly, fingers gripping the hem of my dress. A child unaware she was posing for a narrative she'd later want to step out of. I folded the photo. I didn't tear it, didn't burn it, just folded. The way you close a book you no longer wish to read, but still keep because it was once real. A part of you that helped you grow through pain. When I looked out the window, the sun was falling just right. Not harsh, not soft, just enough to cast my shadow onto the steps. Longer than before, straighter now, no longer retreating at the sound of footsteps behind me. I'm no longer the daughter I used to be. And I don't have to apologize for that.